Hi, this is Lisa from Loops Needlepoint. Today I'm going to show you how to sew together a lined bag. This can be used for talit bags, tefillin bags, even a lined purse or tote, any kind of bag that you want to have a lining in. The first step is to cut out a piece of lining material. I like to cut it generously so I don't have to worry if it shifts. And put it with the front surface of the lining next to the front surface of your needlepoint, and lay it down on front and pin it across the top. We're going to do the same thing with a piece of lining material, and I picked velvet or whatever other material you want to use for the backing of your bag. Pin it across the top, and now the idea is just to sew across here and across here a simple straight stitch so that they'll be attached together. Now when I do my needlepoint, just as a pointer, if you can see this, I do an extra line of single stitch, of continental stitch around the entire piece. When you're sewing it together, first of all, now when I turn it over, I can see that line and it helps to guide me. And also, none of the actual design will be lost. This is my extra stitching line, and so I won't see the canvas and I won't lose my design. Oh, and one other point is we're going to put in a zipper later. Now, I don't mind seeing on the inside of the bag the edging of the zipper. Some people don't like doing that, so at this point what they do is they actually sew it in between the lining and the needlepoint. And then they'll do the same thing to sew it in there. I put the zipper in later. I find it just easier to handle and easier to get a straight zipper inset. So go ahead, first we're going to sew those two, and then we'll do the next step. Okay, now that we have that sewn together, we're going to flip it over. One thing I didn't mention before was I make sure when I do this sewing line, I don't go all the way to the edges. I leave a small amount, a few rows of the needlepoint, so that this I will use later to help me tuck in the zipper nicely. I did the same thing here on the velvet backing side, that the sewed line is slightly shorter than the width of the piece. Okay? So now when we turn it over with the needlepoint, you have to kind of crease the edge. This is where we're going to now attach the zipper. But so we crease this down. You have to push kind of hard, but to get a nice crease line. You don't want the lining to show once you've attached the zipper, so you fold it down tightly. And then we're going to take the zipper and we're going to pin it in here. Now, what I said where I didn't sew all the way to the end, I tuck this lining down so that the beginning of my zipper will actually be pinned straight to the needlepoint. The rest of it will be pinned through the lining. Now I'm going to pin it straight across like this. If you pin it on the top side of the needlepoint, it's so thick that it'll get warped. So I pin it through on the back side. The only issue with this is that when you're sewing it on, you have to be careful that the pins don't get stuck in the plate of the sewing machine, because they will be on the underneath side. So you just have to keep that in mind and make sure that you lift the fabric as you get close to the plate. So I'm just going to go pin this all the way across. Then we'll change this to a zipper foot, and I will sew it here. I sew pretty close to the edge of the needlepoint, and I try to keep it close to the zipper itself so that I get a nice straight zipper across. Okay, once you have sewn that all the way across, you see I do sew it quite close to the zipper because when this bends over, there will be an extra little space here, so you don't have to worry about it getting caught. But this will give you a nice close line. Now, as I said, I tucked under the lining at both ends, so it's a little bit sticking out there. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the backing. I'm going to flip this one over. Again, I'm going to make sure that the lining doesn't show when I make the crease. And I will pin that on to the zipper, the same way I did before. But this time it doesn't matter, since the material is thinner, I can pin it on the top side. It'll be easier to see. I'll switch my zipper foot to the other side, and I'll come down and sew this one. I do the same thing of tucking in the edges of the lining at both ends. Okay, so now what we have is one long piece that is attached to the zipper with the zipper in the middle. On this piece I'm also adding a name placket on the back. This is a good time to add it after I put in the zipper, because now I can line it up with the zipper and make sure that it's straight. So these are attached, and on the other side it's attached with the lining. Also a good time to add a label if you want to. This is what I mean where you can see the inside of the edging of the zipper. This is what the inside of the bag is going to look like. It doesn't bother me, but some people like to hide this edging. Now this is a good time to go and cut off the excess material, the excess canvas from your needlepoint. So I'll take these scissors. You want to leave, I don't know, about 4, 5, 6, 8, 7, 8 rows, something like that. Around the corners, I like to cut it diagonally across, otherwise it gets very bulky in the corners. And then I just cut up the edge and make sure that all my extra canvas is taken off. You just don't want to have too much in there because it makes it stiff and very thick to work with and to use. So you can just cut it up all the way up. And we'll do the same thing along the bottom, the side, and this extra flap at the top. Okay, the next step at this point is to actually sew the needlepoint part to the velvet backing, or material backing. Fold it in half, inside out. And I do this so that I make sure the zipper is lined up right in the middle. I give it a shake, make sure the material is all nice and flat. And now, what I can do is I can go ahead, make sure there's no crinkles under here, and I'm going to pin the material to the canvas all around the sides. And once I have this done, once I have it all pinned, I will sew it. Again, using that extra line, that sew line that I made, that's a single continental stitch. I'll sew right in there, all the way up to the top. Now this is where I pulled apart away the lining before. I will sew all the way up to the top, over to the zipper, up over the zipper, and still with the lining pulled away. It's only at the final step that I sew the lining all the way through, and that kind of hides the end of the zipper. I do suggest that you sew the two sides first, flip the bag inside out, and make sure you're happy with the way the lines came out and that everything lines up well before you do the bottom. When you do come across to do the bottom, make sure, reach inside, and make sure that your zipper is open part way. Otherwise, you will get yourself stuck, and you won't be able to flip the bag back the right way out. So now we have the bag fully sewn all around, well, the zipper's up here, halfway open. These three sides are sewn shut. Now we have to do the lining. In order to make sure that the lining is the same size as the inside of the bag and you don't end up with too much, what I like to do is I pull the side of the lining down over the side with the needle point, actually it doesn't, with the side with the fabric. Now I lay it straight over the fabric. And what I do is, if you're using a light fabric, you can just draw in the line. But what I do is I go like this and I look and see, and I, right by the seam, by the end where I sewed, and that's where I'll put a pin. This is just a marker for me to know that I'm lined up around the bag. I'll do it along the two sides and just one pin, whoops, this one came out, one pin along the bottom. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to end up sewing like this and a little bit here, like this and a little bit here. You have to leave a gap so that you can flip the whole bag the way that you want it to be. Now, this is also where I'm going to end up sewing the lining together. Now that I have this all pinned and I know the size that I want it to be, I grab the needlepoint and fabric sections and I shake down the lining. Once I have it nice and smooth, I'll lay it down, and I'm going to flip the pins to the other side at the same time pinning together the two sides of the lining, like this. Pull out the pin, I see where I took it from, right from here, and now I'm going to pin together the two pieces of the lining. Oh, one thing also that I did is I trimmed off any extra velvet at this point, because now we're going to do the lining, you won't have access to that anymore. Okay, so I flip these pins around all the way that I did it, and what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up sewing the line, this is where the zipper is, I'm going to sew it right over that edge there. This is going to seal together the two sides of the lining with the zipper inside, so you won't see it anymore. So I'm going to sew here to the corner, like I said, same thing on the other side. So now we've sewn the lining, and if you can see what I sewed all the way down the sides and a little bit here, and I sewed over the edge of the zipper also to close the lining up. So now the trick is to flip the bag. First flip the lining over the velvet part. That part is not so difficult to do. Then we get to the part of having to flip the needlepoint. So we open up the zipper as wide as I can, and I'm going to flip it through. Now the trick here with flipping it is to make sure that you get your corners pushed all the way through. The main body of the bag isn't so hard. And when it comes to the corners, this is the last time you're going to have access to these corners. So stick my hand into the lining, into that hole at the bottom, and I really push my corners through to get a nice point at the corner. I'll do this in all the corners and make sure that everything is all straight and even. Now that I have the bag flipped inside out, right side in, right side out, however you want to say it, and all the corners are pressed out, so the final step is to finish the lining. I pull the lining back out of the bag. If you remember, we did a little bit at the corners. So now, if I press those corners in like this, it gives me a guideline for where to do the final seam. So this, I'm just going to fold those ends in until I have a straight line. I'll pin it across here, and then just sew that, and then your bag is finished.